right, thank you all for showing up, the ones that are here. As I stated, we're going to be speaking about colon cancer awareness. And I have people that's going to be doing the presentation tonight. It's Ms. Jimmy Wells. Ms. Jimmy Wells has a lot of alphabets behind her. But trust me, you will learn a lot, and you will take some information back to your family, your friends. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jimmy Wells.
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for the invite. And I will say this, I got over a proud mentality a long time ago. Don't worry about that. I just want to hopefully be fruitful for those of you that are here. If someone else comes, we're going to be good with that too. So what I wanted to talk to you all, what I've been asked to talk to you all about today is colon cancer. And when you talk about colon cancer, we really put it together with colorectal cancer. They put it together as one. It just kind of depends on where you actually find that particular cancer in what we call the GI tract or the digestive system. Now, the first thing though, if I put on there that second slide, because a lot of times I want people to understand when we talk about colon cancer, where is the colon what we're talking about? Because a lot of people think it's everything that's in your gut. It's not. It's everything that's below your stomach. So your stomach actually sits right underneath your diaphragm, like right here. And unless we feed it and fill it up with food, it's usually about the size of your fist. So it's just sitting right here. That's where your stomach is. There's a lot of stuff that's there. There's your pancreas and some other things. Your liver is over here on the right-hand side. That is not included in your colon. That is a part, your stomach's a part of your digestive system. That's the part where the food goes through, get processed. But when we talk about colon and colorectal cancer, we're talking about every stuff that's below the stomach, what we call the guts, the stuff that like they cover, how many feet that you have of intestines. That's what we're talking about when we talk about colon cancer. And it does go all the way to the rectum until where your bowel comes out. So because a lot of times people think, well, I got something going on with my stomach, and that's going to be included in colorectal cancer. It is not. It's everything that's below your stomach, not including your liver, not including your pancreas, and not including your gallbladder. That's something different, but it is everything that's below that. So why is it important? Why are we going to have this conversation tonight about colorectal cancer? The one thing, there are a lot of cancers, it's like a train coming in the night. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to happen. But the thing about colorectal cancer is that you can actually prevent it. There's some things, and there's a couple, like cervical cancer. You can prevent cervical cancer. And in some cases with colorectal cancer, you can actually prevent it. So it is highly preventable. And in most states, the rate or how many people are getting diagnosed with colorectal cancer is going down. But guess what? That's not what's happening in the state of Mississippi. That's not what's happening with us. So when you look at it, overall of all the different kind of cancers that are diagnosed, it is the third. Lung cancer is number one, then you have breast cancer, and then the third one is colorectal cancer. But that's how many people are diagnosed with this. Third for the number of people that are diagnosed, but it's second for the number of people that die. Lung cancer is number one. The second disease, second kind of cancer that kills more people than anything else is colorectal cancer. And then when you look at it, after someone's diagnosed, it is the second highest treatment. It costs so much to treat colorectal cancer because it's kind of a long, drawn-out thing. It's not like a one and done. Sometimes these cancers, you say, we're going to give you 4 treatments and you're done. That's not what happens with colorectal cancer. You are on for 6 months, take a break, you may come back on. So it's a long, extended kind of treatment. And then where does colorectal cancer happen? You have the intestines, you have large intestines and you have small intestines. Small intestines are the part that connect right below the stomach, and it's just what it says, it's small intestines. That's where the food is broken down, where your body takes out the nutrients that it needs. That's the small intestine. The outer part, the outer rim, once the body has taken everything that it wants from the food, then it goes to the large intestine. And basically, that's just a place to hold the weight. You know, this isn't a cute conversation tonight. It's just a place to hold the stuff. If y'all didn't see it at the front, it says colorectal cancer coming from the rear. Coming from the rear. So that's the function, the basic function of small intestine versus the large intestines. So, but when you look at colorectal cancer, where it's happening, the number of people that are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer, first of all, the states that are in those darker shades, we have more people in the South that are getting diagnosed, in particular within the state of Mississippi. And then when you look at the number of people that are actively dying, same thing within the state of Mississippi. When you break those numbers down even more, who is getting diagnosed with colorectal cancer? When you look at it by race, looking at race, Black or non-Hispanic or us, we're the ones that are being diagnosed more often with colorectal cancer. Now our white counterparts are right behind us. And then our Native American Indians also, but African Americans, we in the United States are diagnosed more often with colorectal cancer than any other ethnicity in our country. That's a problem. So what are we doing that's different? Also, you know, looking at what's going on in the country is one thing. I always like to bring it home. What's happening in Mississippi? In Mississippi, the basic principle about any kind of cancer, especially cancer that doesn't come from the blood, the basic principle is that if we can find it early stages, you're going to do better. We have a better chance of getting rid of it. We have a better chance of curing it. The problem with colorectal cancer in the state of Mississippi is that we find it late. People are waiting. They don't go to the doctor until they have symptoms. By the time you have symptoms, you have a lot of disease. So when you don't have any symptom, that's when you actually can find it and get rid of it. And that's what we're going to talk about preventing it. So what is happening? So we're finding it later. So why are we finding colorectal cancer so late? The literature's out there. Everybody says that people know, but a lot of people don't know that if you go get a screening and if you take out a polyp, a lot of people don't know a polyp is just something that you leave it long enough to turn to cancer. That's all a polyp is. It's like a pimple on the inside of your GI tract, on the inside of your intestines. And it sits there, but if it stays there too long, it will turn into a cancer. So that's what it is, but we're finding it too late, we're leaving it there too long. So getting people the resources and the education to understand why is it important. Oh, I just had a polyp. That's how to look at that. That means you took that polyp out. That means you have stopped yourself or delayed or prevented yourself from actually developing into a cancer. The other thing is that we in Mississippi have a lot of what we call disparities. Disparities, which are worse health outcomes that are found within a certain population or a certain community. Most of the time we talk about disparities where you look at this particular community versus another community, they're totally different. How many people are getting diagnosed? It also has a lot to do with money, who has insurance, where you live, how many doctors are in the area in which you live. Do you have a doctor that's going to recommend that you go get screened? Do you have a doctor that knows all of the screenings that are available to you? They will tell you that. You know, we still have situations where doctors don't tell you that at this age or at this point in your life, these are the screenings that you need to have done. I cannot tell you, when I was younger, I went and asked for mine. My doctor didn't even mention I asked for it. And I wanted to know, when is it time for the time yet? So a lot of times you have to be your own advocate and say, it is time and I need to get this taken care of. So the ultimate goal is knowing that we have these worse health outcomes in certain parts of our communities. What we want to achieve is health equity. We're going to look at that in a little bit. What does that mean and what does health equity look like? When you look at this handout, there's one where you got these equal versus equity. You hear that word a lot. So equal means everything's on the same playing field. And if you look at that first picture that says equality, you see this big tall guy, middle-sized person, and the short and by nature over there. Equal means they all get the same box. They get the same size box, but when you look at the outcomes of them having that same size box, are they getting the same results? Tall dude did not need that box. He could have stood on his flat feet and still saw the game without any problems. The middle-sized one, it kind of helped her to see, but this little person, this is the same box, same size, that's equal. But the short person with the equal box, did they get the same results? They did not. So that's equal. So when people talk about, we're going to do equal for everybody, we're going to do the same thing for everybody. Everybody doesn't need the same thing. Depending on who you are, depending on what your resources are, and a lot of times depending on where you live. You know, I may not need the same thing that you need. So that's what equity is. Equity is everyone gets what they need to get the right outcomes. Tall guy did not need a box. He was tall enough, he could see it. You know, there's certain people that live in our state, they don't need help. They got fat checks sitting in the bank, they got all kind of insurance, they live right around the corner from the doctor. They don't need the box. But then we got some of us who need a little help, and then you got some of us who need a lot of help, some of us with 2 boxes. So that's what equity is. Equity is not the same thing as equal. And equal is not what we mean when you're trying to talk about health equity and trying to get rid of disparities, those worst health outcomes based on where your starting point is. So that's this picture right here. I really like this picture because for me, it made make sense. Does it make sense? Does it make sense looking at this in this way? Because again, depending on what your starting point is, you may need something different to get good outcomes. So when you're talking about colorectal cancer, there are some basic risk factors. And honest to God, I could take this risk factor and talk about every cancer known to mankind with these risk factors because they're all about the same. When you talk about risk factors, some of them you can change, some of them you can't change. And then you got this health disparities over here. So stuff you can change. They're called modifiable risk factors. Tobacco. Tobacco is not a good player for anything other than the people that are making money from it. There's no good that's coming from tobacco from a health related standpoint. It has implications for worsening or actually promoting someone actually progressing to colorectal cancer. The other big thing with colorectal cancer that really plays a part is our diet. And more so about the fact that what are we eating? Are we eating high fiber? Or are we cooking our foods to death? Are we eating canned foods all the time? Or are we eating fresh vegetables and fruit the way an apple, the way it can be divided off the core? You know, the roughage, the things that actually go in our system and help us to actually have those healthy bowel movements, those regular bowel movements. Because when you don't have regular bowel movements, and let me please say this, it is not regular to have bowel movement once every 3 days. That is not normal. That is not healthy for your body. Remember, the small intestines take all of the nutrients that it needs, and the large intestine just holding on to stuff till it gets a chance to come out. And when you let stool or bowel movement sit in your gut long periods of time, it just sits there and ferments. That is not healthy. That is not healthy. So and the thing that helps you to have regular bowel movements is not taking a bunch of laxatives. Now, you can train your bowels to need laxative in order to go, but the thing that works the best, y'all remember that saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Eat an apple every night before you go to bed. That is a wonderful thing to get your gut going. Drinking plenty of water, eating apples, eating nuts, eating strawberries, eating blueberries, anything that has a peel on it, something that you can chew and swallow that's running and that will give you extra fiber. Eating salads, eating broccoli, steamed broccoli, not cooked to death till it's falling apart. Those are the kind of things we talk about that we need to do low-fat diets. We need to do high-fiber diets. But unfortunately, what we see here in Mississippi that we're doing high-fat. We're gonna add some fat to it. It tastes good. We're gonna add, and now I'm not the person to tell you not to do that because you look at me and tell that I do that. But you don't need to do it every day. That's the thing. You have to make good choices, you got to make wise choices. So if you're going to eat one of those meals that you're going to sit up and have to loosen your pants back, should not be every day. Should not be every day. Should not be more than once or twice a week if you're going to do that with the green, with the ham hocks and all of that in there, and the fried chicken and all that. If you eat fried chicken one day, you don't need to eat 3 days a week. You don't need to eat the skins every day. So think about what you're eating, and my in-laws are getting tipped at me because I got a fruit basket and then I got a candy bowl. I try not to go by the candy bowl every day. I try to go by the fruit. So I try to always have the option of having something that's not candy, not sweets, that are not potato chips every day. So if I have a candy bowl, then I have another bowl with some raisins in it. Raisins are a good source of fiber as well. Now, I know if you're diabetic, you got to kind of watch that and kind of see where you are, because certain fruits do carry a lot of sugar, so you just have to be careful with that. But at any point in time, when you have the option to choose between something that's sugary, sweet, processed, versus something that is fresh, normal, and natural, you always need to try to have those options available. So that's stuff you can change. Stuff you can't change, well, no matter what you were, you cannot change. We can't change our age. I don't care how much folks doing the Botox and the stretching this and the stretching that and taking the shot to lose 30 pounds, 100 pounds, 50 pounds. That's all good about it. That's what you're going to do. But the bottom line, unless the Lord takes you away from it, you're not changing your age. And the older we get, that does increase our risk factor of getting colorectal cancer. Can't change that unless you diagnose with the Lord. You cannot change your family or your medical history. Can't change that. There are certain things with colorectal cancer that you can find that are actually passed down in family members. This is mostly, there's something that is passed down in the Jewish family. It's called Ashkenazi Jewish family. They actually have a really, really high incidence of colorectal cancer. But then there's also something called Lynch syndrome. What Lynch syndrome is a syndrome is a disorder where you just have polyps all throughout your colon all the time. That's what it doesn't happen often, but that's one of the things. So these are things you cannot change. The other thing we talk about a little bit is health disparities. Remember, it's worse health outcomes based on something that you have no control over. You don't have any control over where you were born. You don't have any control over, things that may be different, or basically that actually put you behind the gun, behind what we call that magic circle that people have in the world. You can't necessarily control that. You cannot control whether or not you're born in Shalou, Mississippi versus Madison County. You cannot control whether or not you're born in Lexington, Mississippi, where there is not one GI doctor in the whole county. You can't change that. So those are the kind of things we talk about, disparities and social determinants of health, depending on where you live, where you're born, where you play, or where you pray. Some people teach certain things in their churches, Pastor. They teach certain things. They teach that you don't need to go to the doctor, you go pray it away. Okay, the Lord gave us the resources to go get it taken away. Some people will say, well, you remember back in the Bible said, who sinned, the mother or the father, because this person had this disorder? There are some people that still believe that somebody had to sin, or you did something that made you have this. It must be because you're a bad person, or it may be because you had some kind of sin in your life. God did not say that. So we need to stop saying that. So all of those things can have a different outcome as far as our health is concerned. So again, what are those social determinants of health? They are things where we, again, born, live, how we learn. If somebody told you growing up in your house that you never, that if you had, that everything that you, okay, this is the one I love, watermelon. Watermelon. How many people like to put salt or sugar or salt on their watermelon? Y'all talk that. And that's the way it tastes good to you. But from a health standpoint, even though that doesn't really have anything to do with colorectal cancer, from a health standpoint, that's the last thing you need to be doing, is putting salt on watermelon. It is the last thing got some stuff that depends on where you are, those disparities, the things based on those social determinants of health, those are the kind of things. So in addition to that, what makes it even worse? What makes it worse? So with colorectal cancer, if you're 50 or above, your risk factors do go up for developing colorectal cancer. The other thing is if you have a personal family history of someone, immediate family member that had a diagnosis of colorectal cancer, that's going to increase your risk factor. So that is very, very important because I actually had a conversation with a lady. I had a conversation the other day with a lady that she asked me about, have y'all heard about all these genetic tests? Has anybody brought that up or had any conversation about that? So the thought is that you can do a genetic test and find out whether or not you carry something that's going to make you have a particular kind of cancer. But the problem with that is that there's not a genetic test that's going to tell you everything. Genetically, and that means you pass it down from mother to father, that only happens in about 10% of all kinds of cancers that we have, only 10%. So 90% of cancer has nothing to do with something that passed in your DNA, in your genes. But there are cancers that follow a family. When you do a genetic test and you look at it, there's nothing that's passed down, but it may be that your grandmother and your mother and your uncle and your so-and-so and so had this particular kind of cancer. But when you look for it, there's no gene. It's just something that runs in your family. So I always say that because for me, my personal family history is my grandmother had colorectal cancer. My grandmother had chemotherapy. She had surgery, then chemotherapy did fine behind her colorectal cancer. My mom has had early stage 1 colorectal cancer. She had surgery. At one time, my mom was getting colonoscopies every 6 months. So it runs in my family. So what did that mean for me as someone that it ran in my family? So what that meant for me is that when we get to the screening, when you start screening, that changes things. It changes things if that runs in your family. You need to be doing something different. And we'll talk about that when we get to the screening parts of it. So that personal or family history of colorectal cancer. And then the other thing is just obesity within itself or being overweight. But the thing about obesity is not so much about your body size. It's about what you're doing with what you got. Are you moving it? Are you being physically active? It's not so much about the body size. It's what are you doing? Are you walking? Are you sitting? Does your job or what do you do every day cause you to be still all the day long? Do you get up and walk around after you eat? And I'm the one that's so guilty, but you eat, go sit on the couch and put your feet up. My husband is looking at me because that's what I do. But the real thing to do is after you eat, go stroll a little bit, walk a little bit. That's the better, healthier thing to do. So this obesity is, again, don't get so wrapped up in body weight or the number on the scale. Now, I will say the lower the number, most of the time, the better the outcome. But I saw some beautiful, gorgeous, what I call healthy women and men that are moving and doing their thing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that whatever your body size is, make sure you're moving, make sure you're eating properly, and drinking plenty of water. All right? So diet, we need to make sure that with our diet, we need to get away from that high fat. We need to get low fat and increase our fiber. Remember, the thing about the large intestine is just a wastebasket. It's just holding stuff. It's holding all the waste that our body did not use for the food that the small intestines got everything out of it that it wanted, and then it pushed it out to the large intestines. So it's just sitting there waiting to come out. And if you get constipated, it's just sitting there fermenting. Again, a problem, that's a health problem. If you're constipated all the that is a health risk to be constipated all the time. It needs to be moved. So the thing about diet, again, not so much the number, not so much your body size. It's about moving. It's about having a low-fat, high-fiber diet. There are some folks that also have something called inflammatory bowel disease. That is something that it's not something that you can ignore. Usually it's very painful. You have a lot of belly cramping. A lot of times it's associated with a lot of diarrhea. Sometimes we call it dumping syndrome. So that's something that a lot of people, not a lot of people, but if you have that, it's not something that you can ignore. But having that particular inflammatory bowel disease can increase your risk of having colorectal cancer. The other thing is this virus. It's called HPV, which is human papillomavirus. Y'all don't get tired of me because Miss Deborah got me coming back. She's got me coming back, and you're going to hear more about this human papillomavirus. This is a virus that pretty much you can get from, and you can get it, and it's actually a sexually transmitted virus. There are no symptoms. It doesn't matter if you had one partner or 100 partners. One partner will do. It is not about being promiscuous. It's not about having a lot of partners. It's just a virus that is so prevalent that most people in this room probably have it. Most people probably have it. The thing about HPV is that a lot of times it will clear on its own, but when it does not clear on its own and it hangs around, that's when you start having problems. So HPV. The other thing is people that have prior radiation therapy to the stomach or the lower pelvic area, they can have problems with this. And then again, remember I talked about genetics. Again, with genetics, it's only about 10% of people that would have something genetically that's in your DNA or in your genes that you got from your mom or your dad. That's very rare. It doesn't happen that often. So in knowing that, talking about colorectal cancer, knowing that it's one of those cancers that are taking a lot of people's lives, especially our Black and African American lives, then what are the signs and symptoms? How would I know? And remember I said earlier on, the first thing about colorectal cancer is by the time you start having symptoms, you already got a lot of disease. So the key is you want to find it before you start having symptoms. Because the reality is there are no signs and symptoms of colorectal cancer when it first gets started. Absolutely nothing. You think you're doing good. There's no sign. So that's why if you can catch it early, it's not because, oh, I think I got a problem. You go because you know you need to be screened either based on your family history or based on what age you are. It's time to be screened. But some of the later signs and symptoms are rectal bleeding. Now, I cannot tell you how many people say, well, you know, every now and then I have a little blood from there. That is not okay. It is never okay to have. I don't care if somebody told you you have hemorrhoids. It is not okay. That's the other thing. So, Pastor, I'm getting a little personal at the church, so that's okay if you don't mind. It is not okay for you to, even if you have hemorrhoids, don't just assume you're bleeding because of hemorrhoids. It may be, but always go get checked. And if you have something that's bleeding and they say it's hemorrhoids and it doesn't stop, you need to go see another provider. Don't let someone tell you you got bleeding hemorrhoids and they don't stop bleeding. If you have hemorrhoids that are bleeding and somebody checks you, they treat you, that should go away. But if it continues to bleed, that's something else going on. And hemorrhoids may be terrible hemorrhoids, but either way, you need someone to get you the correct information about that. So, the other thing, change in bowel pattern or stool shape. One of the things that happens with colorectal cancer, again, in these later stages, is that it will kind of take over your GI, your colon, where it'll block it off. So your stool becomes really thin, almost straw-like, or you have a hard time passing a bowel, or you're constipated a lot. That's one of the things that can happen. You can have cramping or pain in your lower stomach. And then this is the other thing, unexplained anemia. One of the things with colorectal cancer, with those polyps, if they stay there long enough and if they start turning into a cancer, they a lot of times become really, they look almost like a cauliflower. kind of like bumps all over it, and those little bumps and those little beads that are all over, they become really, really fragile and they will leak blood. So what you will see a lot of times is somebody that's chronically anemic and you can't tell why they're anemic. Now, there are different kinds of anemia. There's iron deficient anemia, and then there's loss of blood anemia. I'm a little anemic, so what's causing your anemia? Somebody should be able to tell you why you're anemic. Most of the time, it's going to be iron deficient. You fix that. Some of the times, one of the symptoms of early or later stages of colorectal cancer is this profound or just this slow, nagging anemia that doesn't get better even though you've been on iron here for 2 or 3 years. And now, bleeding, that kind of bleeding, you may not see blood in your bowel, but your stools may be dark, like black in color, kind of real, almost pasty, like clay-like consistency. That's a sign, and it has a different kind of odor. Not the bowel smells good, but a different kind of odor that is much more foul if there's blood in your bowel. See, this is the kind of conversation, folks. Has anybody had this conversation with anybody talking about bowel movements? See, this is the kind of stuff we need to talk about. Nobody has this conversation to tell you intimately about looking at how many. I cannot tell. Do you look at your bowel? No, I just flush it and get on up and be gone. Do you look at the tissue when you wipe? No, I just get up and get gone. You need to look. You need to look. You need to pay attention. That is important, especially if you're anemic, especially if you're chronically having a lot of constipation, especially one of the signs and symptoms of anemia is that you're always tired. That's one of the symptoms of anemia is that you're always tired, you don't have a lot of energy. So these are some everyday things that we can do to check to see what's going on. Again, it may not be colorectal cancer, but you need to know what's going on with your body. So when you talk about colorectal cancer and prevention versus early detection, remember I said colorectal cancer can be prevented. You really can prevent it. You prevent it by getting polyps taken out. When you snip a polyp out, and polyp looks just like a pimple. This looks like a pimple on the inside of your gut. Mr. Bora, the organization that she works for, they have this big old giant colon. That if you walk, it's big enough and it looks like the inside of a colon. And when you look at it, it looks like a pimple on your face, but it's on the inside of your colon. And so at first, it looks just like a little shiny pimple, nothing wrong with it. Then it starts to change, get that cauliflower kind of look to it. That's when it's starting to change into a cancer. So if you can get that polyp out before it starts to change, you have prevented colon cancer. Now, the screening recommendations. Yes, ma'am, you got a question.
No, I want to ask you, when you have the GI,
Colonoscopy.
and they tell you when you had 2 polyps, you removed them. That was cancer.
That was before it turned into cancer. That's pre-cancer. So when you took them out, you prevented yourself from turning into cancer. Yeah, because if you had left it there long enough.
They returned to cancer.
Yes, ma'am. See, nobody says that out loud. They just tell you, you had one polyp, you had 2 polyps. You're like, oh, okay, I'm good. But yes, you are good. You are good when they take them out.
Okay, well, like I said, they have me on a 5-year colonoscopy.
Because you had frequent polyps.
They took the first time. 5 years later, which was the early part of the year, they got 2 again.
Okay. I'm on the 5-year plan too, because of my family history. When I go, because I started off because of my family history, I was going every 5 years, and eventually I started having polyps. So I'm still on the, typically colorectal screening, if you don't have a family history, and if you've never had polyps removed, they give you every 10 years. Every 10 years.
But because I had the one before, then she put me on a shorter. She put me on the 5-year plan. So that and when I went back, it was 2 more months.
Exactly. So think about it. If you had been on a 10-year plan and you had 2 polyps after 5 years and you double that time, those two probably would have been sitting there cooking, brewing, turning into something nasty. So if you had been on the 10-year, which is average risk, we're going to talk about average risk versus high risk. We're going to talk about that. So that's why that's important to know where you stand. So that's how you prevent it. You have basically, they have prevented you from developing colon cancer. So that's with average risk, starting at age 45. We're going to talk about that. But early detection, what you can do is that diet, the activity, screening when it's appropriate, and knowing what's normal for your body. Listen, the Lord made this beautifully, we're beautifully and wonderfully made. If you listen and pay attention to what's going on, you know when something's right, it's not right. I went to a conference, and this is a doctor, she's actually a lung doctor. She said, you think you have 5 senses. She said, you got one more. She said that sense to tell you something ain't right. Or you think well, something ain't right. She said, that's the sense. When you keep thinking something ain't right. That's that gift being stirred up. When something ain't right and it won't go away and you won't let you forget it, go get it checked, be persistent. So that 6th sense of something ain't right. So when we talk about risk, so the national guidelines now have changed because it used to be 50. It used to be 50 that everybody didn't even start colonoscopies until you were 50. The standards has changed now because we're seeing so many people that are younger getting colorectal cancer. It used to be, you had to be 50, 60, 70 before anybody got colorectal cancer. Now we got people that are 20 years old with colorectal cancer. So that's why the national standards changed to now to get started with your colonoscopy is 45. And that's with no symptoms, with no family history. So that is someone that's at average risk. Average risk. But if you are high risk, so what would make you high risk? Someone that has a personal or family history of colorectal cancer. My personal family history is colorectal cancer. My husband's family history is colorectal cancer. He has a brother that was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in his, how old was I, in his 30s? He was in his 30s. That was, you weren't supposed to get colorectal cancer in 30. And this was over 15, almost 20 years ago now. He had it in his 30s. But he had symptoms. So he went and checked it out. So knowing what your risk is. So what does that mean? Knowing that my grandmother had colon cancer, knowing that my mom had some early cancers taken out very early, what that meant for me, and I'm about, the Lord blessed me to turn 65 this year. When I was 40, I was sitting in the doctor's office and saying, this is what I got going on in my family. I need to get something done. I had my first colonoscopy at 40 because of my family history. So you have to be an advocate for yourself. You need to know, first of all, what your family history is. And I will say, for those of us that have a little more seasoning, that's what I'm calling, we got a little more seasoning on us, you need to talk to your family about what's going on in your family. You need to talk about what runs in your family. So for me, I started my colonoscopies at 40. So what does that mean for my children? We have 3 children. My oldest son, at 42, I've been at him a long time. At 42, he had his first colonoscopy. At 42, my oldest son had 3 polyps. At 42. So what would have happened if he had waited to 45? Or if the standards hadn't changed and he waited till he was 50? My daughter, who's 41, had her first colonoscopy. She had polyps too. They brought her back in 3 years because she was so young. My son is on a 3-year plan because he was so young when they found his polyps. So he doesn't fit this average. Yeah, the average is wonderful again. If you don't have a family history, yes, start at 45. But if you have a family history, you need to talk to your folks. Like I talk to my children, my youngest son is 35. He knows what's on tap for him because he's on both sides, mom and dad. So we need to have these conversations with our family members. We need to talk about what kind of stuff runs in our family. So know whether or not you're average risk or whether or not you're high risk. So what makes you high risk, again, is your family history. And then if you know that you're high risk, you need to have those conversations. I didn't wait for my doctor to tell me it was time for me to have my colonoscopy. I went in there and told them, this is what goes on in my family. I'm ready, I think I'm ready to have my colonoscopy. So you have to be an advocate for yourself. Be an advocate for yourself. So, one thing that I found, especially here in the South, with us here in Mississippi, how many of you know what happened to grandma? I don't know what Maria had female problems. Papa had the male problem. What does that mean? We need to have the conversation. We need to talk about it. Because in our culture, in our African American culture, especially here in Mississippi, you know, remember how children didn't sit around when grown folks were having conversations. Which I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, because a lot of adult conversations don't need to be shared with children. But when you talk about what's going on as far as health-related things, it is important for us to have those conversations. So it is important that you have that opportunity to know what runs in your family. And then that also helps your doctor to make the appropriate choices for what they can and cannot do, or should not do. And also understand that cancer most of the time now is actually considered a chronic disease. Remember early on I said that colorectal cancers cost more than a lot of other kind of cancers to treat, because colorectal cancer is kind of like hopscotch. It's up here, you treat it, it goes away, then it can pop back up. You treat it again, it can pop back up. So it's just like having high blood pressure, you manage it. You manage it for some people. But knowing is not enough. Knowing your family history is not enough. You have to be active on it. You have to act on it. You have to have those critical conversations. You have to pay attention to what's going on in your body. So what is available as far as colorectal screenings? Because everybody knows about colonoscopies. Colonoscopies are not cheap. You have to, most places make you meet a deductible in order to get your colonoscopy, and that is not cheap. My state, Mississippi Blue Cross Blue Shield, my deductible was $1,800. So I had my colonoscopy last year. Had some problems, but it's okay. They got them out. But knowing that, so when I do colonoscopy, I try to put them later on in the year, so I would have ate up some of that deductible. So that's a tough pill for a lot of my husband who got his this year. So I don't know what you put in the, I know you had met your deductible, so they coming. So knowing that there are other options for screening for colorectal cancer. Now again, it depends on what your risk is. If you are high risk, colonoscopy is where you need to be. No holds barred. But if you are an average risk individual that you and your family members have not had colon cancer, there's some other options. There's some stool-based testing, something called a FIT or FOBT, and what that is that you get a smearing of your stool and put it on a card, and they're sending it away to see if there's any blood in it. That's what it does. There is a DNA. There's a stool DNA. Now, it's not checking for genetics, but it is checking your stool to see if there's possibly any kind of cancer cells that are in there. So there's a stool DNA that they're doing. So the smearing on it is sending it away to see if there's any blood. You can do that every year. The DNA sample is done every 3 years. Y'all remember that Cologuard box, that commercial, the Cologuard box? That's what that is. That's a DNA sample. You send it off, and they're just checking to see whether or not there's any microscopic colon cancer in there. But if you listen very carefully to that commercial, it says for people at average risk. It does not, Cologuard and any of these other tests are not tests for people that are at high risk. Next time you hear that commercial, listen for it. I hear it every time because I'm listening for it. The Cologuard is for people that are at average risk. Now, there is a new testing that's available now. This is something where they can actually draw blood, and they're checking DNA, just like when you send a stool in with a Cologuard, and check it for microscopic colon cancer. There's a blood test now. There's a couple of companies that are offering it, that you can get blood drawn, send it away, and it'll tell you whether or not you have any microscopic colon cancer kind of hanging out in there. The science and the technology of how we're detecting cancer and how we're treating cancer. I've been doing cancer nursing now for 40 years, and I can tell you the changes and the advances that are happening now are just mind-boggling. But this is available, and it actually is covered by Medicare. The blood sample, to get blood drawn, to see whether or not you can, and that's fine to do way, way, way early. It finds it before it actually even shows up on a scan. So these are early detection of different kinds of cancer. But then you got the stool-based exams, where you either send it off to see whether or not there's blood in it, you send a sample of your stool off to see if there's any microscopic colon cancer in it, or you can do a blood sample, draw the blood, and it has to be benign. Every doctor's office can't do that. It's not just like drawing a CBC. This is a special lab. You have to send it off to this special company. There are two that I think I have listed here that are FDA approved for that sample to go to, but they are approved, and that's something that you can do. So it's either stool-based, or it can do by blood, or you can do what we call visual exam, and that's where the colonoscopy comes in. I will say, with all of those other exams, whether it's the stool-based, whether it's the blood draw, if they find something, they're going to tell you need to have a colonoscopy. Colonoscopy is the point of all of them. You're going to come back to it if something positive shows up. So I wanted to put this in there to let everybody know colonoscopies are expensive. If you don't have a family history, some of these other options are available to you. You need to have that conversation with your provider about which one is going to be appropriate for you. Again, if you are high risk, then you definitely need the colonoscopy. You need to start there. But if you're not high risk, you're a family member, then you can do some of those other screenings. The main thing, though, I want to leave with you, if you look at this particular picture here on that handout, is that a polyp, again, is usually in that large intestine. Is what we're talking about. Colorectal cancer, you find it in the small intestine is in the middle. It takes all the nourishments, the nutrients, and once it gets everything that it can use from the food, it pushes everything out to the large intestines. That's where colorectal cancer comes from. So when you do that, if you get a colonoscopy, they actually pass. Yeah, it is not, the prep for it is worse. The test itself is fine because you sleep. You don't know anything. But the prep is a little tough because you are drinking the stuff. There's stuff, they call it go light. There's nothing light about it. It's nothing light about go light. But it will clean you up. Your bowels need to be completely cleaned out. And it takes 1 or 2 days to get that prep done. But it is worth it. It is worth it. By the time you get the screening done, they find those little pimples on the inside of your colon, the polyps, they take them out, they have prevented colon cancer. Because you want it taken out as a polyp and not leave it there long enough for it to turn into a cancer. So there are 6 ways to decrease colorectal cancer. First of all, get screened. Get screened, whatever is appropriate for you. When do you start? If you don't have a family history, you start at age 45. At age 45, all of your insurances, and if you have Medicare or Medicaid, will pay for it at age 45. If you have a strong family history, that's a conversation with your doctor, and they need to provide documentation, and you can still get your insurance company minus deductibles. That's the whole thing, minus deductibles, but you can get it done. Eat lots of vegetables, fruit, and whole grains. Increase your physical activity. Take control of your weight and do something with it. Be mobile, be active. Stay as active as you can. Not so much, again, about the number that's on the scale. It's about what are you doing with what you have. Don't smoke. There's nothing good about smoking. Limit or avoid alcohol. Now, I always get tickled at this because it says men can have 2 drinks a day and women can have 1. I ain't preaching the drink, Pastor. I'm just saying. That's what the literature says. That's what the literature says about drinking, because over abuse of anything is not going to be good, and overuse and abuse of alcohol is definitely not healthy for your GI tract either. So, personal notes and things to take away. Take responsibility for your own health. Remember that sixth sense that I talked about, if something ain't right. Take responsibility. Know your family history. Get the appropriate screening based on what your family history is. Make decisions to include healthier lifestyle choices about your diet, activity, body awareness. Making sure that you're aware of when something changes with your bowel movements. There's a change in color, there's a change in odor. Blood in your stool is a little pink, or if your stool gets really, really dark, black, and tarry, that's a symptom. Or if you have persistent pain or discomfort, one of the symptoms also is like if you have a bowel movement, you feel like you never quite get it all out, incomplete, empty. Those are the things you need to be having a conversation with folks about. I also want to remind you there are different groups within our state that work with and try to find resolutions to some of those disparities, some of those inequities that we're having. One of the groups is called the Colorectal Cancer Roundtable that works within our state. Anyone can be a part of the Colorectal Roundtable, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or just somebody that says, you know what, I want to learn and I want my community to do a little bit better. That's what these roundtables do, and there is one for colorectal cancer. There are some national resources to get additional information. All the information that I've shared with you is information from a lot of the national resources that I've listed here. And at that point, I think I've been talking a long time, and we're open for questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. You said at risk, low risk, high risk. Now, say you had a gallbladder removed. You know how that does that impact? You know what?
No, gallbladder is not part of the intestines.
Okay, doesn't it go? It doesn't flow.
It does not. So when you think of intestine, that's anything that your food touches. Your food doesn't touch your gallbladder. Your food doesn't touch your pancreas, and it does not touch your liver. Now, those organs excrete things that help break down your food, but it doesn't touch it. So when you talk about GI tract, it's stuff that your food touches or that your food goes through. So gallbladder, no ma'am, it does not. That's one of those things that outside of the GI tract.
We had our son at age 37, I think, died of colon cancer. He died from that.
So what symptoms was he having?
What were some of the symptoms he had? At first, he didn't have any symptoms, actually, and then all of a sudden, his stomach, I think he started having problems with his stomach, and he had diarrhea, and then after that, when he went in, he was stage 4.
So what had happened, because he was so young, young people don't get colon cancer, and everybody got something going on with the gut. I'm a little bloated, I'm a little crampy, I'm a little this, so we ignore things. Now, you can ignore a little thing, but if something persistently happens and doesn't go away, I don't care what your age is, go get it checked.
He did get checked, but they said it was something, said he must have picked up a virus or something, so they didn't really treat it.
So they told him it was a virus, so he just let it go and just was dealing with the symptoms. So the thing is, again, I'm so sorry for the loss of your son, but for you and the rest of your family, that's a teachable moment. That's a teachable moment for the rest of your family, because if your son had it early, first of all, that means you and other family members need to definitely be on point about what kind of screening you're getting. They need to be definitely on point about looking and knowing what's normal for your body, and don't ignore things just because you're less than 45. Because a lot of times the people that we're seeing, like your son, that were less than 50 at that particular time, they were like, oh, you just had a stomach problem, you just had a little bloating, a little reflux, and all this stuff. And then they didn't pursue it. They didn't pursue it, and you get this false sense of security about symptoms that don't go away. So be persistent, be your own advocate, and say, no, that's something right. Anyone else have any questions?
And by the way, they did take that special test. They have 2 children. The mother had breast cancer, and he had colon cancer.
So they did it.
Right, they did do the test.
What were the results?
Well, they said they had a gene, so they had I don't know what that means.
So there are 2 different genes. So there's a gene for breast cancer, And if you find that you carry or you are carrying that something that passed from mom to dad or dad and all that, what that means then, they are at high risk. So that means that their screening starts early and is much more frequently. So they may be, instead of a 5-year plan, they may be in a 3-year plan. They may be, depending on if they had the first colonoscopy and they had no polyps at all, they may bring them back in 3 years. But with that genetic, passing it down genetically, and with the family history, they are on some, should be on some type of increased enhanced screening. Anyone else? Thank y'all so much. And hopefully this was something that was beneficial and learn something. And, you know, we don't have a whole house full, but please remember to share this information with others. Mr. Bora has these handouts and I'm leaving them. You're welcome to hand those out and to give them to other folks. And she definitely knows how to find them.
I have one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
If you had a colonoscopy at some point and you had polyps, then you go every 5 years, and after now I go every 10 years. I've had them twice. The first time, early on I had 2, and then I went again and I had 1. And then after that, I think I must have done 3 years, and now they have this out to 10 years.
Okay, so with that 10 years, the last time you had 2, you had 1, and then you probably had none. And at having none, then they put you out to 10 years. That's what they did. But again, remember that something ain't right. If you are feeling in your gut that I need to be checked again in 5 years, go sit in somebody's office and say I want to be checked. Because you meet the guidelines. But yes, ma'am, so having that, the other thing I did mention about colorectal cancer is typically it's a slow growing cancer, which is why they can take polyps out and not check it again for 3 years or 5 years. It takes a long time for those polyps to turn into a cancer. They will turn. So that's why they are able to spread it out. Unlike, you know, with breast cancer, you can't go 3 years and leave something in there like that. So colon cancer is a slow growing cancer, which is why they can spread those screenings out to that degree. Anyone else? Thank y'all.
Let's give Ms. Jimmy Wells a hand. All right, well, I think you guys are coming. I cannot let you leave without asking you a couple of questions. I invited you to bring awareness. Ms. Jimmy has educated you, and I'm going to question you so you can be empowered, okay? Like that gospel song says, I need you, you need me, we all need everybody. So I want to see how much you guys learn. I'm asking you questions, just raise your hand, and then I want you to share that information. Okay, so can someone tell me what the recommended screening age for colonoscopy? What's the recommended? Correct. She said now at 45, it was 50. Okay? Tell me, is it okay for you to, true or false, to not share your information with other family members? That's false? Okay. Why is it false? Everybody needs to know. That's right. Okay. True or false? Is it okay to have a bowel movement once a week? No. Okay. I know you guys laugh. You know, I was at an event,
But you know what?
in Grenada, Mississippi this past week. And a lady told me, she said, oh, it's like every 2 weeks before I go to the bathroom. I said, no ma'am, you need to empty that every day. You need to have a bathroom every day. You need to make an appointment with your doctor and see what's going on, because that is not healthy. That is not healthy.
But you know what? I went to a pediatrician. I took our little goddaughter to a pediatrician, and I mentioned that to her, and she told me that it's normal. She told and her mom was with me, Christasia. We asked about that. She said that some people have a bowel pattern, and that it was normal. So we did that. That was just not so long ago.
So what was the age of the person you were asking?
That little They just, she
Okay,
right
so
there.
she's active and she's eating, so that's a different phenomenon versus an adult.
Oh, okay.
With an adult, there's something different. So yes, we all have different bowel patterns, but your bowel patterns are based on what activity you're doing and what you're eating.
Okay.
That's what's gonna determine your bowel pattern. But the healthy gut, I remember one time I had a professor, he said, a healthy gut is a noisy gut. The one that's rumbling and growling, that's the one you want. That's the one that embarrasses you when the prayer going on in the church cell. When you're hungry and it starts growling. That's a healthy gut. That's when you want to hear those noises, because that means that your gut is working and pushing that stuff through. If your gut is quiet all the time, that means it's not the motility, it's moving stuff is not working the way it should. So you want a noisy gut, and if it's too quiet, that means you need to get it jump started, eating some carrots, and some whatever, to get it started, drinking plenty of water.
Thank you, Ms. Jimmy, for clearing that up. Clearing that up, got that?
Probably taking it from the rear.
Okay, can someone name me 2 screening options? 2 screening options.
Blood test and a stool.
Yes.
Third one is a colonoscopy. Okay. Name me 3 ways, this is the last question, I'm gonna let you all go. Name me 3 ways to decrease colorectal cancer. What are some things you can do?
You can't go out, food, eating,
Healthy eating,
exercise, moving around.
exercise, moving around. That's a big one. Go get screened. All right. Thank you so very much. I'm going to let Pastor close us out. And next week, we're going to have 6:30 again. And I will announce that message on Sunday. So be sure and tell a friend, tell a neighbor. We thank you, Latrice, for inviting a co-worker, and she came out. So I want everyone to be empowered to go out and help others. Pastor?
So what is the next one? What's the next? Next week, what is it?
Head, neck, and esophagus.
Head, neck, and esophageal is going to be next Wednesday at 6:30.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, again. I remember last year. You're getting there. Thank you for the information. And I believe that we are in a situation where we're in because we are not on board getting the information that we need. I'm looking at the crowd now. So sometimes we're all the worst enemy. Ignorance is part of the problem. That's not a bad word. That's something that's information you don't know. That you do with yourself in the position you're given. Thank you. Let's ring the bell a little bit louder next week.
Y'all heard, so we'll have to be in church.
And so, we're saying that we're the one that dines most,
Yes.
and I'm thinking that's why. We don't have impatient, then those that do have impatient and keep them quiet. And so we just pray that we'll stir somebody up so that we can get the information out, and so that we can surprise it. So young. All of us got it. Yes.
Remember Chad Bozeman?
Yes.
Back
Yeah.
then? He was very, very young.
And seemingly very healthy.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I be willing to bet that men is the most hard-headed when it comes to it.
Well, women are
so busy, we take care of everything else.
Yeah. We're gonna go to the doctor, so we have a day. Well, let me pray. Father, indeed, we thank you for our time tonight. We pray for Sister Wells, and we just pray. Thank you for giving her the brain here to give us the information, that we can make these choices that are according to our health. Help us to be proactive and take care of ourselves. And I heard us say, no matter what your body is, we got to keep it moving. And so we done. And exercise and eat right. And so that we might be able to serve Jesus a little bit longer. And Jesus